بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. So in God's emissaries, we left off talking about Isa alayhi salam, and we went over some stories about that we've mentioned several times before, and it dealt with Bada, when something appears one way, but then something happens which changes the outcome of the event. Like, for example, we said when we give a sadaqah, it prolongs the life or prevents the calamities from coming. Also, we have riwayat that the one who gives sweets to his brother, it wards off the calamities from him and these type of things. So sometimes something is written, but we do something else and it changes that. And we mentioned how this is even for non-Muslim people, it's for anyone. Allah gives them their reward in this life. We said that Alama Hilli, rahmatullah alayhi, he had in some of his books that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi passed by a Jewish person who was going to cut down some wood. And when he saw him, he said that the Jew would be killed that day. He would be bitten by a poisonous snake and die. So when evening came, the Prophet's companion saw that Jew and found it very strange that he was still alive when the Prophet predicted him to, have going to die. So they asked the Prophet about it, and the Prophet asked the Jew, what did you do? And when the Jewish person came, the Prophet asked him to open up that bundle of wood that he had cut, and out of that wood came a snake. So the Prophet asked the Jew, what act did you do today? So the Jewish person answered that he didn't do anything, out of the ordinary, except that when he was eating, a beggar came and asked him for some of his food. So he gave him one of the two of the things that he had. And the Prophet said to that Jewish man that it was destined for you to die today, but because you gave sadaqah, it removes 70 evils. And after hearing this and seeing the Prophet reveal about the snake coming to kill him and sadaqah preventing the death, that Jewish person accepted Islam. So this is where we left off. It's good even like we give sadaqah like every day, or if we think that we'll forget, we can make the intention to give it for the whole month. And for example, we say, okay, we're going to give this $100 or $30 or something, $50, and we're going to give it for the whole month and have something that repeats. And we can dedicate the thawab of this for one of the masumin, for example. And these things help us in this life and in the hereafter. So Isa alayhi salam, now he wants to send his disciples as emissaries to different places so that they could spread these teachings, the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala amongst the Bani Israel to anyone who would listen. So one time he sent two of his emissaries to the city of Antioch. Antioch is actually here in Turkey, Antakya, they call it. And it's in the place where they had the earthquakes this year. So Jesus sent two disciples to this area in Antioch. So they went there to give da'wah and call people to believe in Tawheed and to believe in the messengership or prophethood of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. So those people who were in that area, they were idol worshippers. So they captured those two emissaries and put them in prison. When the news came to Isa alayhi salam, he sent his closest disciple, Shamun, or Simon Peter in English, to go there and to free them and assist them, help them in doing da'wah to those people. So Shamun, he acted with forbearance. He began to associate with them. He went like in a cautious way, discreet way. And he started associating and getting close with the associates of the king. He didn't proclaim his beliefs. He didn't come out and say, For example, I'm a Muslim, I believe this, I believe that. He just started dealing with people and getting close to them. He didn't tell them about his aqidah or his mission or anything, or that he was affiliated with Isa alayhi salam. So they started to like him. Then they mentioned him to the king, that we met someone that's very nice, a good person. So the king called him to the court, and he was impressed with his akhlaq and his wisdom. So when he established a relationship with the king, Shamun addressed him and said, "My king, I am informed that you have imprisoned two people who called people to a different religion. I'm wondering if you listened to what they had to say. Like, why did you put them into prison? What were they talking about? It's interesting. I want to know." The king said, "My anger prevented me from that." So Shamun said, "If it please my king, allow me to debate with them. If they speak the truth, let us follow them. And if we speak the truth, then they will join in our religion." So when the two emissaries were brought forth, they were both shocked and relieved at the same time to see Shamun. But they concealed and hid their self emotions and these things. So Shamun asked them, "Who sent you to this place?" They said, "We were sent by Rasulullah Isa, Nabi Allah. He was sent by the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whom there's no other God than him." So they're basically telling them, La ilaha illallah. So Shamun asked them, "What's the proof of this claim?" Everyone who comes with a claim, they need to have some proof. "Can this God of yours restore the sight to the blind man?" So they replied, "If we ask him to do so, he can, if he wills." So Shamun turned to the king and said, "My king, bring forth two blind people that have never seen in their life." So his guards, they brought two men whose eyes were sealed shut. They had skin grow over their eyes, and they were looked the same as the rest of their forehead. So those two emissaries, they prayed to Allah, and they asked Allah to give the sight back to this person, to the first one. So right in an instant, he opened his eyes and he saw the light of day for the first time in his life. So Shamun also prayed and restored sight to the second one. So the two emissaries, they cured one, bi'idhnillah, and Shamun also prayed, pretending to be on the side of the king. So this one also got his sight back. So he said, "My king, we have matched their miracle with our own. Bring forth two men who are paralyzed and can't walk." So the guards brought two people. Again, these two emissaries of Isa alayhi salam, they prayed, and Shamun prayed, and both were able to bring these people back to their ability to walk. So Shamun said, "My king, I have matched them in their miracles. However, there's one more test. If they're able to pass that test, then I'll join their religion. I have heard that my king had a son who died. If their God is able to revive your son from the dead, I will admit defeat and I will believe in their God." So the two emissaries prayed and they made sajda. They asked Allah to revive that boy. When they lifted their heads, they told the king, "Go to your son's grave and you will find him alive if Allah wills." So all those who were present, that's kind of that's a very shocking thing to say, that your son has come out of his grave. He is now alive. Go check. So when they all went to the grave of the king's son, they reached it. They found the boy standing next to the grave with dirt still falling from his head and his clothes. The king was, very emotional when he saw that. So he hugged his son. He asked him, "How was this life after death?" The boy said, "I was dead, and I saw two people prostrating before Allah, doing sajda, begging Allah to raise me. So he did." The king asked him, "If you saw these two men, would you be able to recognize them?" He said, "Yeah, of course, I'll remember them." So the king ordered all the men present to stand in a long line, and he asked his son to look at each one. And when he came to those two emissaries of Isa alayhi salam, he knew right away that those were the men. So he told him, "These two." So Shamun declared, I, for one, hereby declare my belief in their one God and in the truth of what they claim. So the king also believed, and the people of Antioch also believed with him. So they all became believers in Isa alayhi salam. So very interesting story. One of the things we can also take out of this story is a point to note is that these miracles were also given to non-prophets. They were representatives of the prophet. So they were successors of the prophet. And they were able to do such miracles. As we see with Asaf ibn Barkhia, the successor of Suleiman alayhi salam, was able to bring the throne and quicker than the blink of an eye. So this was also a non-prophet, a successor of the prophets. So the Awsiya, they are able to do these type of things as well. So how come it's strange to some people, when they hear that the Imams, or the successors of the last and final and greatest messenger of Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they say that someone is exaggerating, or that it is strange to claim that they did such things, when we see these things present with the successors of Isa alayhi salam. So that's one thing we can take from this. It says Isa's behavior was the best, impeccable. He never did anything the least bit reprehensible, not even something from makruhat. He never turned away an orphan. He never laughed very loudly, like out of place. He never even moved the insect from his face like a fly. If it came, he didn't even bother this. He never held his nose in aversion to a rotten smell because he didn't want to offend the person who was responsible for it. A lot of times someone will say, oh, that smells really bad, like you should go put deodorant or brush your teeth or something like that, and make the other person feel embarrassed or bad. There's a story about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I remember reading that one time the people would bring fruits, and he would share them with his companions. He would bring fruits to the Prophet. So one time this one man, he brought the fruit, and he gave it to the Prophet. The companions looked and they wanted some, but Prophet wouldn't share it. And they were like, why didn't you share with us? Like, you want to keep that all for yourself? And na'udhu they had a bad image of the Prophet from that. So the Prophet, once the man left, the Prophet told them, he said, I took a bite out of this fruit, but the fruit wasn't, it didn't taste the best. It was, either going bad, or it was too ripe or something. And if I gave it to one of you, then you would have taken a bite and you would have said something, and it would have made the man feel bad that he brought some inferior thing to the Prophet, and that was the best that he had. And I wanted to honor him, and I didn't want to make his contribution seem like something that was wrong with it. So that's why he didn't do it. And we see here that Isa alayhi salam, he was in the same type of way. Didn't want to offend other people. So we have to make sure that we look at the way other people may feel, or before we say something, we put ourselves in their shoes for a second and say, how would that go over? It's we should never really say the first thing comes to our mind. Sometimes we need to say the second, third, or fourth, or fifth thing that comes. So we need to think about it. Said he was an optimist and encouraged his companions to see the best things out of life. As the glass is, we say the glass is half empty, they say it's half full. So once they passed by this corpse of a dog, it was decomposing. And the disciples, they said, this is disgusting, the smell is so terrible. But Nabi Isa alayhi salam, it said, look how brilliantly white its teeth are. He looked at the best in this thing. Even though the dog was decomposing and it was a corpse, he still found something good to say. Instead of saying the bad negative thing, said the dog had very white teeth, But when we look at other people, we find the worst thing in them and highlight that thing. And we forget about all the other good things. If we see a piece of paper a white paper has a black dot on it, we're not going to say like, how white is this paper? We're going to say this paper has a small spot on it. I don't want it. It's not good. Give me another paper. So Isa alayhi salam was the opposite. So Isa chose in life of disavowing the world, we can say, like not really caring about these type of things, just the necessities. So aesthetic life. He used to have no pillow. He would lay on the rock, and he wore very coarse clothes, and he ate plain bread, and he didn't eat many different dishes. He wasn't extravagant in these things. He lived very simple life. At night, his light was the moon, and in winter, his shelter from the cold was the open lands of the east and the west. It says his fruits and vegetables were whatever the earth grew and produced for the animals to eat. He would eat the same. And he didn't have, the author says he did not have a wife to infatuate him, nor a child to cause him regret, or we can say worry nor wealth to distract him, nor greed to abase him. His mount was his legs, and his servant was his own two hands. So he lived very simple life. He was alone. He had his disciples, but he didn't have family and these type of things. And most of the things that we worry about, he didn't have them. Most people, they're worrying about the mortgage or the electric bill or the car payment or their spouse or their children and the school and all this. And Nabi Isa alayhi salam didn't have these things to worry about. So a lot of time when we lessen the things that we worry about, like we don't worry so much about life's problems. We just ask Allah to help us and we do our best, but we don't stress too much about it. We'll find ourselves feeling more relieved and less stressed and more focused. We can focus on bigger things. He says, when he was asked, why didn't you marry? He said, what shall I do with marriage? The man said, maybe you have children. Isa said, what would I do with children? As long as they live, they are a temptation, and when they die, they cause grief. So he says, the author says in a footnote, I must reiterate that these statements, if they are correctly attributed to Isa, do not reflect the Islamic ideal in which marriage is and having children also is highly encouraged. It's half of our faith to be married. And some of these things, the code of living or way of life was different. So in time of Isa, maybe it wasn't looked at, in the same way as it was in the time of Prophet. So during the time of Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was highly encouraged to be married, have children, and for his ummah also to spread in numbers. And he would pride himself on the number of mu'mineen on the day of judgment, inshallah. I said, Isa alayhi salam, even though he was a simple person, simple man, lived a simple lifestyle, we can say, he did wear a ring. And the inscription on the stone was taken from two lines of the Injil. It said, good for him because of whom Allah is remembered. Woe to him because of whom Allah is forgotten. So we see this sunnah of wearing ring, having inscriptions on them, and Aqiq, Dur Najaf, Feroza, these other type of things. For example, we see, I don't know if you can see here, but the ring, maybe not. Ring has like dua around, or has writing on the stone. This comes from Sunnah of Prophets, and it's one of the alamat al-Shia, or alamat al-Mu'min, one of the sign of a believer from Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, one of the hadith. It's one of the 5 signs of a believer to wear a ring on the right hand. And some rings have inscriptions, some don't. We see in the prophets had different type of inscriptions on the ring. It said Isa was, his physical characteristics was he was of medium build and he had curly hair. But he was not quite away from the world as much as his mother's cousin Yahya. Yahya used to cry constantly and he never laughed. But Isa cried and laughed. And through this, he gained great favor with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we see, and this is from Riwayat actually, that it's better to laugh and cry, not just cry. So we see that it's good to have both. Isa alayhi salam was successful in instilling in his disciples the same spirit of indifference to worldly pleasures. They too lived poorly and they wanted to escape the worldly temptations. As we said, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam divorced the world 3 times. He did the 3 divorce on the world, the permanent. And it was precisely because of this that Allah granted some of them, the companions of Isa, the ability similar to Isa. They could walk on water, they could cure the sick, they could heal the blind, bi'idhnillah, just like Isa could. So when Allah saw that Isa's disciples had been nurtured to a high maqam or state or position, he addressed them directly through divine inspiration and said to them, "Believe in me and my messenger." For a non-believer, this would have been a command to enter the faith. But for the disciples, it was a call to rise to the apex or the pinnacle of faith. So we see here also again that they said, they said, "We believe and we beg you to bear witness that we have submitted." This is one of the ayat from Quran. And we have to note here that these were all non-prophets whom Allah addressed directly by inspiration, just as we see that Allah has spoken to other people, such as the mother of Musa, the mother of Isa. So why would people, should they be surprised when one says that Fatima Zahra, Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, the leader of the women of the worlds, that she, or the 12 the Imams alayhimus salam from her offspring, received some sort of inspiration from Allah? Why would someone say that this is ghulu, or this is exaggeration, or something too, you guys going too much, too far? But we see that it's already happened before with the disciples of Isa and the mother of Musa and the mother of Isa. They are all non-prophets, and Allah spoke to them. Why can't Allah speak to Fatima to Zahra? Allah speaks to people who are not prophets. Doesn't mean that they get prophethood because Allah spoke to them. No, but it's inspiration. Says his disciples were not the only ones to affirm their faith so strongly. There was one family in particular, one member of this family would not make any extraordinary effort to worship other than what was obligatory. So he only did his wajibat. Yet whenever he prayed to Allah, his dua was answered. Another man from the same family would spend 40 days at a time worshiping and fasting, preparing himself to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in the end, his dua remained unanswered. So he came to Isa and asked him, something must be wrong with me. What's going on? Isa offered a dua and asked Allah to tell him what was wrong with that man. Allah inspired him, "Ya Isa, this servant of mine has tried to approach me without coming through the proper channels. He made dua to me while he had in his heart an iota, a small speck of doubt in you. If he were to supplicate to me forever, I would never answer him." When Isa told the man what Allah said, the man admitted to having some doubts. And he asked Isa alayhi salam to intercede on his behalf and ask Allah to remove this doubt from his heart, and he did that. Thereafter, this man became one of the closest companions of Nabi Isa alayhi salam. So there are unfortunately many of those who have doubts in the Imam of the time, Imam Mahdi, ajallahu ta'ala farajuhu sharif, due to the prolonged ghaiba or absence. And we learn from this story that this could be a reason that one's prayers get blocked or they don't get answered. Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim alayhi salam was asked once, are the Qa'im with the truth? The Imam replied, "I also rise truthfully, but So the person asked him, are you the Qa'im, that has the truth? So he says, I do rise, because Qa'im means to rise. I rise truthfully, but the real Qa'im is he who will remove the enemies of Allah from the earth and fill it with justice. He shall be my fifth descendant. His absence will be lengthy, during which multitudes will turn away from the faith, while only a few will uphold it. So we see that during this time, the Imam said it will be very difficult and it will be very lengthy, and a lot of people will leave the path of Tashayyu, or the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and only a few people will hold firmly to that. Many people have doubts, but we have to remove the doubt. We have to uproot the doubt. We have to find it and don't push it aside. We need to research, gain better explanations. Sometimes maybe you have to go to 2, 3, 4 people in order to find the one who can explain it the best. One time we were here, one of my neighbors had a lot of doubts in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the religion and these type of things. And I was sitting with another Sheikh, a friend of mine, and we went out. The guy wanted to go out with us for coffee. So we sat down. He doesn't know he didn't know we were like scholars or anything like that. We are just talking with him. And he started giving his doubts. So the other Sheikh, he started answering them one after the other, and explaining in detail and all of these things. And the guy looked, he said, I've been living here all my life in, a Muslim country, and no one could explain these things to me. And none of the Imams, the masjid, they have answer for me. No one could explain it. It made me doubt the whole thing, if the whole thing is right. But the way you explained it was very nice, and now I understand and got a better idea of it. So, subhanallah, a lot of people, they don't know how to fix the doubts. And I've seen a lot of people leave the religion because they had one doubt and no one answered it. And then that doubt made them doubt in the whole of the Quran, and then the whole of the religion, and then the Nubuwwah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the doubt spirals like the snowball on the mountain. It starts as something small and rolls and gets bigger, and then it crashes. So we have to find those doubts, uproot them, and we have the answers with the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We just have to look for them. Once Isa was traveling with his disciples. When they passed by a town, Isa asked his companions to set up some camp on the outskirts of there, so that they could go into the city, and they were looking for a treasure. When he entered, he wandered through its streets until he came upon an old, beaten up house. He knocked and was greeted by an old woman. He asked if she lived with anyone. She told him that only her orphan son, now a young man, lived with her, and that he spent his days gathering kindling in the desert, so that he could sell it at the market and support himself and his mother. He asked her if he could be their guest, and she welcomed him in. She prepared a place for him to sleep so he could get comfortable, left him to settle in. And when her son came home, she told him, Allah has blessed us with a righteous guest. The light of indifference to the temporal world and goodness virtually emanates from his face. Rise to the occasion and serve him and keep him company. So the young man served Isa alayhi salam, showed him good hospitality, whatever he could, even though he was poor. They began talking, and Isa asked him about his life, about his work, his job, and all the other things. And he found him to have very good capability, mental capability. He had strong intellect, and he saw a good potential in him to grow spiritually. So he saw that his heart was occupied with some other thing, some sadness. So he asked him about it, and he got him to reveal what was really going on, and he could find a cure for that. So the young man told him, I was gathering things one day when I passed by the palace of the king. From a distance, I caught a glimpse of the king's daughter, but quickly looked away to preserve my chastity. So, however, he says, from that moment, I have not been able to stop thinking about her, as my desire for her increases every day. I don't see any escape from it except death itself. So Isa said to him, if you like, I will make a plan so that you can marry her. So the young man asked his mother before, agreeing to the plan. So she said, I don't think this man would promise you something if he couldn't do it. Listen to him and do whatever he says. So the next morning, Isa alayhi salam told the boy to go to the king's palace and announce to his guards that he has come to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage, and to then return and tell him what happened when he did that. So, imagine this young poor boy has to go to the king into the front of the palace, tell the guards, I've come here to ask for the king's daughter in marriage. So he did it, and the guards, saw him and kind of laughed him off, and he looked rough around the edges, and said, oh yeah, this guy's just joking around, and just, blew him off. So they conveyed the message to their king, and he was upset, and he was also curious to see, like, why would someone, from this status come and ask for my daughter? So he let him come into his presence. Once again, the man repeated what he wanted. So the king told him, I will not give you her hand in marriage unless you bring me a chest full of rubies, corals, diamonds. Then he went to enumerate a treasure he knew would be greater than anyone could find. No one, even the king would not possess such a treasure, whatever he described. So the young man said, that he'll bring the king an answer the next day. So when he told Asa what happened between them, Asa walked with the boy into a nearby hut made of mud, and he was in a state of disrepair. So it was falling apart. He prayed to Allah, and Allah made the hut into rubies, corals, diamonds, and whatever else the king had demanded, and even better than that. And he told the man, take what you need and go back to the king. So needless to say, the king and his courtiers, his guards, they were, astonished or shocked at this, but they asked more. They asked for more before they would consent. So the man returned, he got some more things, brought them back to the king. This time the king realized there's something special about this boy. So he spoke to him privately, and the boy told him all about Nabi Isa alayhi salam and his own love for the king's daughter. So the king consented and told the young man to bring Isa to the court so that he could, officiate the marriage. So they were married that same night, and the next day the king spoke with his new son-in-law, and he perceived the intellect and intelligence that impressed Isa alayhi salam. He saw what Nabi Isa saw. As this daughter of his was his only child, he decided to make the young man his crown prince and the heir to the kingdom. The next day, the king died suddenly, and the crown prince became the king. The following day, Isa came to his court to say goodbye to that young man, who was now a king. Subhanallah. He said to him, O wise man, you have many rights over me, and I cannot thank you sufficiently for even one of them, if I were to live forever. However, something occurred to me yesterday, and if you don't explain it to me, I'll never be able to enjoy all that you have helped me get. So Isa asked him, what is that? So he said, when you were able to raise me from that lowly state to this lofty state in 2 days, why have you not done the same for yourself? Isa replied, if a person knows Allah and his reward and perceives the fleeting nature of this world and its baseness, he will not desire fleeting power and fleeting things. He won't want anything that will perish. In Allah's proximity and in our knowledge and love of Allah, we take spiritual pleasure in the face of which those fleeting pleasures count for nothing. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he said, if man perceives his death and its speed towards him, that is racing and rushing towards him, he would certainly detest the world and everything in it, all its hopes. There's a interesting narration similar to what we see here with Isa, not elevating himself to have riches and all of these things, even though he had the ability to do so, as he raised the status of this young man in 2 days, bidnillah. We see the same with the Imams from Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Saleh ibn Sa'id, he says that I went to see Imam Hadi alayhi salam, the 10th Imam. I said, my master, in every situation, they want to degrade your status and decrease your rights so that they have accommodated you in such a bad room, which is for the poor people. Like you are living in a poor place, they have you you are struggling. He said, Imam said, you, son of Sa'id, is that the level of your wisdom? Like, is that what you really think? Then he pointed by his hand to the other side and said, look, the narrator said, when I looked, I saw suddenly green gardens with servants, and they were as beautiful as pearls inside shells. I also saw birds and deer and streams, which astonished me. Then the Imam says, wherever we are, such things are ready for us. We are not living in the poorhouse. So this very interesting narrations. The Imams could have changed those situations and gotten riches and wealth and all these things. So that's not the aim that they were after. And they didn't want those things. And we see also that Imam Mahdi, Ajallah Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, will uncover many of the gems and the secrets of the earth in order to utilize them to eradicate the poverty. He has the ability and the knowledge to do so. So the king thought for a while after Isa told him this. And then he said to Isa, when this is the case, why have you chosen for yourself what is better and placed me in this great trial? Isa replied, I did this to test your akal, your intellect and intelligence, and so that you could procure a great reward for having chosen to abandon all this which is now at your fingertips, and so that you could be an example for other people. So the king who ruled for less than a day, he left his throne. He put on old woolen clothes, the harsh woolen clothes of the poor, and returned with Isa alayhi salam. When they reached the camp where the disciples had been waiting all these days, Isa told them, this is the treasure that I was seeking in this city. I have now found it. Alhamdulillah. So very interesting story about the reality of the life and the reality of the world. And money comes and goes, things come and go, but the bounties with Allah, they remain. The good deeds that we do with Allah remain. So Isa sent 12 of his disciples with Yahya to preach to the people and order them to cease the marriages of uncles and nieces, because in that time they were doing that, and they he forbade it after this, Nabi Yahya. The king in the land where they were preaching was in love with his niece, and according to the custom, he wanted to marry her. When the king's sister, the girl's mother, heard rumors that Yahya was threatening to destroy her daughter's future as a queen, she decided to act fast before the king learned of the new prohibition. So she dressed her daughter in very provocative clothes and told her to go seduce her uncle and to coerce him to promise her anything she wished. So the king was so taken with his niece that he promised her whatever she wanted. As her mother coached her, the girl demanded the head of Yahya on a platter. He protested, but she insisted, and being someone born out of wedlock himself, he agreed to this. When he says, well, we know when we say this, that he's born out of wedlock. The murderers of all the prophets and the imams were also born out of wedlock. We have from Riwayat. Not every person born out of wedlock is bad. We're not saying that. But those who killed the prophets, they were only those who were born out of wedlock. When Yahya arrived in the city, the king summoned him to his court, and he slaughtered him with his own hands and placed his severed head on a golden platter for his new bride. So the Khawaj, this also happened in the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salam. The Khawaj had been defeated at Nahrawan, and most of them had died in that battle, but a few of them escaped. And Abdul Rahman ibn Mujam, La'natullah alayh, he was one of those who escaped. So he was consumed with his desire to kill Imam Ali alayhi salam and was in quest to find an opportunity to do that. So by coincidence, he met a woman from Khawaj. Her name was Qatama, whose father and brothers had also been killed in Nahrawan. So she too had a very strong hatred for Amir al-Mu'mineen. So Abdul Rahman ibn Mujam fell in love with her and proposed marriage to her. She told him that the price of her hand was the head of Ali ibn Abi Talib. This only strengthened Abdul Rahman ibn Mujam in what he set out to do, and he promised his lover the moon if she asked for it. But she said that nothing was of interest to her if she could not get the head of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So we see this similarity also here in the tale of and the story of Yahya alayhi salam. So I think we ran out of time. We take 5-minute break, inshallah, and we come back and we can finish this chapter. I think we have just 2 pages left, and we'll be finished with the book, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala